A radical Islamist, a Pakistani grooming gang and a transsexual paedophile walk into a pub. Well, they might be allowed to, but you're not allowed to talk about them. There is an absolutely mental new law set to come into effect that could ban pub goers from talking about controversial topics in case it might cause offence to pub staff. Labour's new pub banter crackdown, or workers' rights charter to give it its official name, could mean that bar staff who overhear your conversations about things like trans rights or grooming gangs could claim that you're harassing them with your words and they can boot you out. So the Equality and Human Rights Commission has warned that the proposed new law, due to come into force next year, could curtail freedom of expression and be applied to overheard conversations. A pub conversation could count as harassment if it is, quote, unwanted conduct that has the purpose or effect of violating a recipient's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment. Well, if that conversation is about so-called protected characteristics like gender, then you, my friend, are in double trouble. This is an absolute farce. The pub is where people go to talk about this kind of stuff. The pub is where people go to escape the kind of cretinous guardianistas that police our speech everywhere else. We're going to end up in a situation where a bloke in his 70s who's been drinking 5 pints a night in the same pub for 40 years cracks a joke about his wife's driving, and some 20-year-old with bright blue hair and a just-up oil vest kicks him out and bars him for life. What is it about people on the left banning free speech? Up in Scotland, Humza Yousaf wanted to criminalise people for stuff they say in their own home. I mean, you can picture it now, can't you? Christmas dinner, Grandad's at the table, surrounded by several generations of his own family, and he makes a comment about the pro-Palestine badge his university student granddaughter has chosen to wear. And boom, the police kick the front door in, Grandad's in handcuffs and he's up before the magistrate in the morning. Labour already wanted to ban smoking in pub gardens, but I think now we know why, don't we? It was actually just in case people hung around outside the pub, caught a glimpse of the fact that the Holiday Inn next door was now a migrant hotel, and then dared to start a conversation about it. Is it any wonder more than 400 pubs closed last year? 34 pubs shut every single month. Here's an idea. If you don't like hearing people who've had a few pints speak about controversial issues, then don't work in a bloody pub. Here's another idea. If Labour is so worried about left-wing snowflakes being offended by what they hear, then why doesn't Keir Starmer stop being so completely useless? Stop giving away sovereign territory and making us pay 9 billion quid for it. Stop hammering farmers or freezing pensioners to death. Stop calling us all racist. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Stop taxing the living daylights out of us. I find those things quite offensive, to be honest. Do you remember when Jeremy Clarkson said this?
Would you invite Keir to your pub, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister?
No, he's banned. He's the first person to be banned. He's actually on a board in the hall. He's banned.
Why? What have you got against him?
Hello? I thought you were running a news operation.
And he was right, wasn't he? And so was this guy. Today, we are all this man.
That man is not allowed in my pub. Get out of my pub. Go on. Calm yourself down. Get out of my pub.
Here's a message for the left. Save your political correctness for the poxy vegan wine bars of Islington and leave our traditional British boozers alone. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. We've got political commentator Alex Armstrong. We've also got journalist and broadcaster Esther Krakow and journalist Jonathan Liss. So I'll start with you. I mean, seriously, are we going to end up in a situation where some numpty with blue hair overhears a conversation about a bloke in a woman's toilets and everyone has to go home?
That's a very specific scenario. Have you thought
I've
a lot
been there,
about this?
Esther.
Have you?
What, in the women's toilet?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, go on.
Well, look, but what you're highlighting there is the incompatibility with this new sort of employment bill and the actual reality of the workplace. And the bigger question it draws is obviously Labour's priorities, right? They're not talking about creating more jobs. They're trying to over-police the few jobs that currently exist. I mean, there was talks of the fact that Labour's NI hikes have basically killed off any job growth for 2025. And they're not addressing that. Instead, they're trying to make the workplace more unbearable for employers with all this red tape. The reality is, if you work in the entertainment industry, for example, or you work in nightlife, you're going to have drunk customers that will say things that you may find offensive. Does that mean that every person that works in a nightclub or in a bar or in a pub is just supposed to be unemployed. It's completely unworkable. And these are the kinds of things that you say their heart's in the right place. I don't think their heart or their brain, if you can find it, is in the right place or anywhere to be found.
I'm sorry,
but it's just unworkable.
No one has the right to not be offended, Alex. And the pub is a sanctuary. The pub is a safe haven.
That's what you have a problem with. It's the pub, isn't it?
Well, it is. It's a sanctuary where you can go and you can have a few pints.
You're not bothered about the clubs and the cruise ships.
Say stuff that you might not always say in front of your missus.
Yeah, Nigel Farage got this right earlier on today.
That's politically correct.
Nigel Farage said they're like little parliaments. They're where we go to discuss the nation's problems, to get it off of our chests and to release a little bit. And I think he's absolutely right. But I think what's absolutely tragic about this is that it shows again Labour has forgotten where it came from. It's meant to be the party of the working classes, the party of the man down at the pub, the woman down at the pub. Where have they gone with it? They've gone full Orwellian, full Big Brother, which is meant to be a TV show, not how you run a country. And now we're getting to a situation where you could just be speaking to your granddad, like you said, in your pub, and someone behind the bar goes, I'm calling the police.
Why does that have such a problem with free speech? We've seen it up in Scotland, where you can be at the dinner table and all of a sudden Humza Yousaf wants to kick your front door in. And now we've got the
Where did he say that, Patrick?
Criminalising people around their kitchen tables.
No one is talking about this at all. This is just a blown-up story that has no basis in any foreseeable reality. It is totally, it's totally unworkable. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It says in the story,
right about that.
It insists the definition of what constitutes harassment: unwanted conduct that has the purpose or effect of violating the recipient's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile.
It's subjective. You could overhear something that you might find offensive. I suspect you are now.
I could never be offended by anything you say because I know you do it with such good humour.
You would turf me out of my
I could never turf you out of your pub.
Why are we obsessed with the pub? I mean, this could happen in a club or, like, on a cruise ship.
Yeah, because
I hope no one gets turfed out of that, to be honest.
The pub is like, British tradition, British culture. Go down the pub, have a chat with your mates.
You guys have some very unsavoury conversations.
You don't think it's...
We do, but that's the whole point. There are little safe havens.
The point of this is, it is very subjective. So a conversation that some people might find about just talking about what's in the news right now, which is things like giving away some sovereign territory or grooming gangs or whatever, right? That is something that someone might find problematic.
For example, if you have an opinion, an adverse opinion on the Israel-Gaza conflict, for example, which is highly incendiary, that could count as some sort of harassment. Look, this is clearly unworkable, but I think the bigger issue is Labour's priorities. They're focusing on all this red tape for employers, and they're not talking about creating more jobs and like making employers more interested in investing in the UK. That's, for me, a problem.
Let's bring it back to the issue at hand, because I think that, as with a lot of these stories, there's a kernel of truth and it kind of gets blown up into a cultural issue where actually I think that we could probably meet in the middle. I think it's completely fine for people to have views that are completely different from mine and to talk about them robustly in a pub. And I enjoy going to the pub as much as the next person. I know that your viewers will think I'm some vegan who stays at home, goes to bed at 8 o'clock. But I actually do enjoy myself. Okay. And I enjoy going to the pub. But here's the thing. If you are going to be in that pub and shouting things that are deeply offensive and which a reasonable person would think were offensive, such as using racial slurs or directing arguments at strangers in a way that is making people feel uncomfortable, it's completely fine for the owner of that pub or for a barman or whatever to say, do you think you can keep it down a bit?
It's about the staff of the pub. So it's not... This is the thing. So it's not about what the other punters might find. Now, punters, in my experience, tend to sort that stuff out themselves quite often in the cobbles, or in the car park, which I'm not advocating. But it's about... Let's say you're in a Wetherspoons,
what have you been doing?
You're in a Wetherspoons, whatever time, and it's, a bit rough and ready or whatever. It's not about the clientele. It's about the one person behind the pub who works there, who finds offence on something, and can you turf you out?
You're absolutely right. And that bar person, for example, could take the pub to court, the landlord to court over it. Therefore, the pub would probably have to close down. I think what you were saying...
They don't earn enough.
Well, exactly. But what, Jonathan, you were saying is that, OK, well, let's meet in the middle. It's not going to be so serious. We've seen free speech laws weaponised in this country. So it's all very good
normally against the left,
say,
actually.
Oh, you know what? Come on, nonsense. It's OK to say, we should meet in the middle, we should be sensible with these policies, but they don't. They get weaponised. Some crazy dictator comes in to Parliament on some sort of landslide majority and starts locking people up for tweets while we've got crime rising through the
Well,
roof.
Alex,
That's
come
the
on, you know,
problem
the
with
Prime
these
Minister's not locked anyone up because we have a separation of powers as
Well,
countries.
okay,
You know
sure.
perfectly well.
On the
So the
note,
courts do things,
Well,
and the Labour government
yes.
did not introduce any new
Well, we did keep them
legislation
specially open to
before
lock
the
those people up
courts
for
sentenced
24
the
hours,
rioters
7
to
days a
jail.
week,
If you
so
have any complaints
I don't
about this,
know.
Patrick, kindly direct them to the last Conservative government under whose tenure these
That's
laws were
true.
actually made.
That's absolutely true.
Is this rule now under Labour, this workers' rights bill, actually giving workers too many rights?
Well, it'll just make them unemployable. I mean, you can't. Workers can sue you from day one for unfair dismissal, but yet they're also saying, but we're going to have a mandatory probation period. So then what's the point? If they're in a probation period, why should they be able to... Technically, you're not really their employer yet until you become a full employee with all the rights. And they're turning us into France, which I don't know how familiar you are with employment rights. You had like sort of 30-year-old people with PhDs that were basically interns because you had French companies that were reluctant to make people actual full employees, give them full contracts. So they would hire them for a year, basically hire them on slave wages to make sure they fit the bill and then give them a proper job. They can't rent or anything like that because they don't have a proper job employment contract. We don't want to be in a situation where we make employing people so unattractive and impossible. And this goes back to my point about Labour's priorities. They talk about growing the economy. This is part of it. This is about making it obviously, there's a balance to be struck. But I'm sorry, we're not sending people up chimneys and expecting them to inhale asbestos like for morning, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know, we have a reasonable balance, and I think this is one of those things that tips things over the edge.
Yeah.